Hello, this is Arkheim and this is Disclosure Now. Welcome to the show. Um, I figured since I am changing the name of this, kind of taking this channel a little bit more seriously, sending it in a whole new direction in a way, I figured it'd be a good idea for me to start from the beginning and tell my story. The first time I did that was on Penny Bradley's show, Knocked Off and Pilot. You can go and watch that if you want. But for now, I think I have a bit more information after some time has passed. And just to put it on my channel as well, I have it here in one concise place. So I'm just going to start from the beginning. The first experience that I ever had was on Lake Winnebago, and I was a baby, and I don't even remember it. And this is my dad's testimony. He said a UFO showed up. There were black-robed individuals on the ship. You could see them through the windows. He said that they were close enough where he could throw a rock at them. My mom grabbed my brother and ran away into the car. She still to this day denies that the experience ever happened. My father says it did. I tend to believe him. Because they can make people think things that happened didn't even happen. They're pretty good at it. So that kind of turned into an awakening after a while for him. He was having very powerful experiences, and he started talking about a lot of far out things without the context that we have now, where he maybe sounded a little more sane. However, his sister did tell me when I came public that she remembered my dad talking about this, and she was pretty on board with it, and she thought it sounded really rational. But once he started talking about Jesus and stuff is when she got lost. He lost her, you know. So I was a child at the time, but I think that the reason why he started going off the deep end was, first of all, he didn't have context. Okay, he didn't have the understanding that we have now, and second of all, I think they're using voice to skull V2K technology to make him hear voices in his head. And I think that they attacked him with these same voices. There's an incident where voices told my dad to take his own life or they'd harm his family. And so, being the loving father that he was, he tried to end his own life. And thankfully it didn't work, and by a miracle he's still here. But flash forward to all these years later, I hear about the Omega programming. I remember him bringing up how he saw red when it happened. He was seeing red. And I know Preston talks about between age 30 and 33 is when this kicks in, and that's how old my dad, or 30 and 35 or something like that. My dad was in that age range. There's just a lot of things there where I don't think that was just my dad just did that on his own. I think my father is a shaman. I think that he's a powerful individual living in a society that didn't give him the tools and resources he needed to be able to help others with his abilities. I think that's really what happened. And we're just now beginning to start to understand these things all over again because these concepts have been robbed from us. So that's where I'm at with what my father's experiences were in this. And yes, he was at Montauk. He's a time soldier. He's in this too. I didn't know he was my dad at Montauk. I didn't know who he was. But I do remember encountering him a few times, and he was in these programs. And yeah, me being public and finding out the things I have has given him a lot of context, I think, and helped him understand things better for himself. However, he's not going to be a public person. He doesn't want to talk on shows or anything like that, and that's okay. So when I was in second grade, this is the next incident. I was walking home from school, and I saw a flying saucer. I remember thinking how strange it was that no one else could see it. I remember I could sense energetically from them, like telepathically or something, that they felt those strange. I could see them, and it made them kind of panic. And I remember going back inside because I was trying to find. I went inside, I didn't go back. I went inside to get a camera. First I called my dad out. He was looking at it, basically, I couldn't find one. I went out there, it was gone. My dad said it had just disappeared. Basically, it just moved a little bit, and then it was gone. So that changed my perception of reality because I went to adults around me to ask what happened, and they told me that I couldn't have seen that, and it was impossible, and it didn't exist, it couldn't have happened. So that made me realize that there's really nobody I could trust, because I know what I saw with my own eyes, and that there must be that we live in a world where people must just like outright be lying about what actually is going on. I mean, that's been huge for me to have the perspective I have on reality now. It's quite possibly the incident that was the trigger to get me my memories back in the first place. In fact, I would say it was. Um, so saw the water treatment facility UFO, and then there, right around the same time, I was in second grade, Miss Stephen Hagen's class, the TAG program. I got pulled out of class and asked about being in the TAG program. I had different memories of this than I remember getting tested, being brought in, and being in this TAG program. And then the next year, there are other kids who did not remember me being in the TAG program, the Talented and Gifted program, which is a real program that helps children. It helps them succeed in areas like if they're very good at math, or they're very good at writing and they're creative, whatever. It helps you find your strengths and highlight your strengths, instead of just being in an all-encompassing learning environment, sort of, I guess, is from what I understand is what it is. Maybe that's kind of maybe incorrect, but they pull these kids out of class because they're talented and gifted, because they're special is what they're saying, right? But these kids didn't remember being in talented and gifted, and that's because I wasn't there. They were pulling me out of class and bringing me and doing to some sort of strange facility and doing all sorts of tests on me and stuff like that, and torturing me, and that's what really happened. But not in the timeline of my memories, so we'll come back to that later. I did not realize what was happening to me with the TAG program. I did not look deeply into why those memories were differing. I actually kind of just thought these kids were messing with me or something. I didn't know what the explanation was. So we'll go into that later. We'll come back to the Talented and Gifted program once I get to the point where my memories start going back on that. So I did always, when I initially got my memories back of aliens, it was from an automatic writing thing I did, and I saw a whole lot at once. It was a lot to take in, and I didn't know how to translate it. But I just saw these visions, and I felt and just saw basically memories, real events. That's the best way I can describe it. And it sent me into a mental psychosis, almost, I want to say. It put me in a bad place. I remember when it happened, I was just screaming. For the longest time, my explanation of it was like, I guess the hybrid programs, I guess Greys abducting you. I didn't connect it to the military. Later on in life, I found Dr. David Jacobs, Carla Turner. These are like some 90s old heads that are kind of these nuts and bolts UFO people. Well, no, I would say they're beyond that. I think I'd say they're beyond nuts and bolts, but they're a little more down to earth, very empirical with their research, especially David Jacobs, who did a lot of research into the hybrid program, and I think his work is really good and very accurate. Carla Turner was the first person to talk about the military abducting her and ET, and that was kind of, she didn't get to the point where she found out about super soldiers and stuff like that, but she was on the cusp of it. And I looked into these people after I went and saw my friends. I went and hung out with an old friend that I grew up with and reconnected. And their mom asked me what happened to me when I was a kid, and they're very serious about it. And that kind of, I was like, I just told them, something happened to me, but I don't know what I can do about it, so I don't look into it, really. I don't really think about it, is what I said. But that struck me that, I was a child, so I can write it off as my memories being fuzzy or this and that, but here's an adult who clearly remembered the events much more clearly, right? And they were concerned that something serious happened to me, and I could only, because of my, I was there and something did happen, and it just buried it, but it just made me remember, yeah, something did happen to me. So I started kind of looking into it more again, and of course I was finding, Dr. David Jacobs and Carla Turner, and for a while, that's where it stopped. And I'm not talking bad about those two particular people, because they're great, but there's this, we all know this in the community, that there's this certain level that you can get to, and then there's this firewall, right? And it's like, once you get to this firewall, It's like these UFO people. They only understand so much. They can only answer so much of the question, and then you get to this place where it's like, okay, well, we don't know anything. And you know, Dr. David Jacobs and Carla Turner, these guys were doing this stuff in the 90s, early 90s. So, and it's almost the 2020s at this point when I'm looking into these things, and I'm just like, how is it? Like, I remember thinking, like, how is it that how many years later this is still how far we've come? Like, these people, because to me, I was looking at all sorts of stuff, and some of it resonated with me, some of it didn't, but these two particular people really resonated with me. I felt like their work was accurate, like they're telling the truth, and they were uncovering some really important stuff. But like, again, like I said, that I feel like that whole, there's kind of the nuts and bolt UFO people, the nuts and bolts, the they're talking about the crash stuff, the crash saucers, and they have physical evidence and stuff like that. And these people are great. We need them for the movement to have the momentum that it needs to gain the traction that it needs to have. But it is kind of like there's also this thing going on where once you get to this level, there's a firewall, like I said, and you can't get past it. And that's where I was mentally. Because for me, there was no explanation that I had that could give me the context I needed to understand these experiences that I was having. And there's no way. We live in a world that we were programmed where I didn't even consider that I could be having whole entire lifetimes robbed from me within one lifetime. Like, that wasn't even a thought. That doesn't exist in the world. So how am I supposed to think about that and put it into context with my situation, help me understand what happened to me? Like, that's not possible because I didn't have the context, and I didn't believe these things were possible. I didn't believe it was possible. I had that firewall. The same firewall that we see now, where you get to a certain level and they don't want you to go any further. And then us, the people who have these experiences, are looked at as hypotheticals, and we're looked at as a detriment, as people who are muddying the waters, when all we are is people who have had experiences and have to share them. We feel a responsibility to share them. Maybe not everyone. Maybe there's grifters and bad people. In fact, I know there are. But there's many genuine people that aren't getting very much out of this at all. And they're simply just trying to speak their truth. And it's kind of like the Farside Institute, Courtney, that individual, what he said. He thought it was really strange that that all these super soldier YouTubes and stuff like that were getting these strikes, getting these violations, and they weren't saying anything very mean or offensive or anything like that. They're just saying some things that were kind of wild. So then they remote viewed it, and they found that Tony Rodriguez's story, they found it to be accurate. And their remote viewing is very empirical and very scientific, and for a lot of people in the community, that sent shockwaves. So I had just this dream at one point. This was the thing that broke the programming for me and made me start looking past the nuts and bolts. Was I had this dream that I was in a lecture hall, and there was a little girl to the right of me, and there's this military guy at this podium, and he's basically barking orders at us, telling us what's going to happen next. And it's a huge room, but there's only me and this little girl, and God, we're little kids. You know what I mean? And I'm thinking in the dream, I'm looking at his face, I'm like, okay, it's blurred. And he's telling me about, well, first, like, it did hit me that he was saying something about you've been trained how to use your abilities, now you're going to be transferred how to use them in combat. But I was looking at his face, it was blurred. I couldn't see his face. And I looked to the right, and the little girl, who I think was my trauma twin, her face is blurred. And I just remember, like, realizing, oh, I'm dreaming. And then the thought that came, because I knew it was safe to think it, was like, F you for what you've done to me. I wish I could use these abilities. I want to use these abilities to make your head explode or something like that. And then I woke up, and I was like, what was that? It was very shocking, very jarring. I could tell it wasn't just a dream. I couldn't understand where it could have possibly came from. And that made me be like, whoa. And I had to look once, these super soldier videos and stuff like that. Like I said, there's that firewall, and I came to that firewall, and I was in a place where I couldn't get past the firewall. I knew there was something going on, but I couldn't look at it at a surface level and understand that there are humans involved, MK Ultra, all these things. The real, really important things that people, the real important connections and dots that people need to connect and make. I wasn't realizing them myself for so long. I just didn't want to look at it. I just want to see it because it was just too far out for me to grasp its reality. It's too far out for me to understand. So when people don't believe me and stuff and think I'm crazy, I can kind of understand because I was there at one point. But when you have these experiences, it rips you right out of that comfort zone that you were mind controlled and put into to not see what's right in front of you. Okay? And eventually, I just had to do it. I looked into Tony Rodriguez. It was his interview with Michael Salla, and it blew my mind because he was clearly being honest. I could just tell the authenticity behind it. And when he got to the blurred faces part, the blurred faces bit blew my mind, ripped the Band-Aid right off of the fact that, yes, that was a real thing you experienced. This is a shared reality that people are experiencing. You're not the only person who's had faces wiped out of their memory because these people who did this stuff to you do not want to be held culpable for what they did to you. They don't want to be held accountable. And that's why they blur out their faces in your memory. That makes so much sense. They don't want you to be able to remember who they are and then be able to look them up and find them. So they have a technology where they can stimulate the type part of your brain that remembers faces, and they can trick it into blurring the faces. Basically, is what they figured out essentially, from what I understand. And yeah, that made me have to sit back and accept that something bizarre happened to me. Eventually, I did a meditation. I looked deep into these memories of Talented and Gifted, and I went in deeper, and I realized, wait a minute, something happened there, and it's all connected. And the Talented and Gifted and the kids not remembering me being there, like, that's because I wasn't there. They weren't messing with me. That was real. I actually wasn't there. And they thought I was lying and being a loon. They thought I was crazy. They literally thought I was crazy. And yeah, it makes you feel like you're crazy. But that's what happened. I was getting pulled out of class. And so I said I would come back to those tag memories. Well, then it started hitting me that, I guess I should go with the timeline. First, I had the conversation with my mom about how weird the tag program was, about how my abductions, I think they're connected, and she said she remembered, I'm sorry, she didn't know what to do, but she believed me. And I just said, I think the military is involved, and she said, well, I actually think that makes sense, which was both relieving and disconcerting at the same time. I kind of hoped she would maybe talk me into some sort of more rational train of thought, but that was more comfortable, right? Very uncomfortable truths being uncovered here. But that's not what happened. She told me I should look into it more, and I found a small little community of people, and one of the people being Joseph Powell, who was very helpful to me. And I did eventually go back to the take thing. I got the memories back of, how I got called down to the office, how they asked me these strange questions, like, would you be able to read minds to prevent crimes before they happen, and all these weird things. And do you have star family, and have you been on spaceships? All this stuff, they really asked me these questions in this weird questionnaire, and it's always been weird to me. But it wasn't until fairly recently that I realized it was connected to the aliens, to the spaceships, to all that stuff. I didn't realize it was connected until recently. And it's like I said, it's because of the firewall. There's this, it's like you can't even, people can't even grasp or accept that these technologies, portals, time travel, clones, all being used in conjunction with each other, they can't accept the reality of it, and that it exists, and that people are going to have whole lifetime stolen from them. And yes, I was there, not too recently, but fairly recently. It wasn't that long ago where I couldn't wrap my head around that myself. So that's why I think people need to be more patient with people. And people just need to talk about this as calmly and rationally and just as real as possible. like I'm trying to do now, so people can see that it isn't all just like some science fiction story thing. There's a lot of darkness there, and it's not fun, and it's a reality that needs to be addressed rather than something that needs to be swept under the rug. So yeah, I got the memories of Tag back after doing some I don't know what you want to call it. Joseph did work. Was it energy work? I don't know what it was, but he did something. We had, I was in meditation and he was doing some stuff and I could feel things in my aura and stuff. Don't know exactly what he did, but he unblocked something. And that's when more memories started coming back and flooding in, was after he did this weird unblocking thing, and I got taken. Not long after, it was like the next day or that night or something like that, I had a needle mark on my neck, which hadn't happened to me in a long time. So it was like kind of like buckle up, buttercup kind of thing. Like I was like, holy crap, this is real. But yeah, I got the memories back of the tag and how I was actually getting pulled out of class. I got the memories back because like I looked into it, I thought about it, I meditated, and I was in the shower when I got a lot of these memories back. And because the shower does that somehow, I don't know, it stimulates things and makes you have good ideas. It does something. I don't know what it is, but anyway. So basically, I remember that I was on this table. I remember that I had electron like stuff hooked up to me, thing on my head, all that, lying on the table, and they were shocking me. Well, there was a TV. They weren't just shocking me for no reason. There was a TV, and it would beep and change colors. I could not see the TV, and this guy was telling me, tell us what color's on the TV, and I'm like, I can't see it. And they're like, okay, well, we know who you are, you fucking monster. We know what you can do. You can see the TV. And you're gonna tell us what color's on the TV, basically, whether you like it or not. And every time that it beeped and I guessed wrong, they would shock me, torture me. And when I guessed right, they wouldn't. And it got to the point where every time it beeped, I was saying the exact color and I could see it. I could see it perfectly, like I was looking at it, basically. And that was one of their ways of activating your abilities. You only will activate your abilities, only come out if you need them, and they know this. And they stimulate and put you in an environment where you're gonna need your abilities. So that's why they do that. So I got the memories of that. The memories of, they're very similar to the Montauk training rooms, but different and much more friendly. And that must mean that this was some sort of other altar, or I don't know how it all works. I don't know if all my altars were created. I know I had altars created in Antarctica. I know I had altars that created at Montauk. I don't know if they created more altars when this tag program thing happened. I don't know, but I can tell you that it was like I learned everything all over again. So it tells me that it wasn't Jacob. It tells me that in fact I think it was maybe Ryan Sterling, which is my CIA altar. I think it might have been him, which I don't even think that's his real name. I think it's a code name. So that's how deep it goes. But yeah. Yeah. When I got these, so I'm sorry if I'm being confusing at all, but I got these memories back of that, of what actually happened in Tag, and also I was getting memories back of Montauk because of this energy. I think it was this unblocking that happened in my aura or something that I was helped along with. And yeah, I got the memories back of being very close to Preston Nichols. He would bring in music equipment for me. I remembered that. That was one of the first memories I got. It's like it being like Christmas because he brought in like some music stuff, like a synthesizer and some drum machine or something like that. And I just remember being excited about it because he met Altar just like I do, enjoyed music a lot and making it. Yeah, we bonded over that. And I remember being close to him. And the sandwich thing, I remember that he would feed me. When we were all eating dog food, okay, which I didn't really clearly remember that, but somebody else told me, yeah, we were eating dog food while you got to eat that sandwich. We're watching you get to eat nice, good food while we were all eating dog food. Because the way they had it set up was here's the office. Okay, this is how the Montauk training room with all the children in it was set up. Right. There's an office in the middle, and it's the same concept as like a prison tower that's in the middle of everything where you can see everything. Same concept, but simplified. There's a table in there. I think there might have been like a little fridge in there and been like a sink or something like that. So, but I know for sure there was like a table in the middle of it. And Preston would have a sandwich on it. It would be a big sandwich. And he always cut me off a piece and let me have some. And I think he would for me and James, to be honest with you. Because, like, it was a back and forth thing between me and him. Like, he liked both of us. And he kind of tried to make us compete for his affection. And in the same way where the reason why he let me have some of the sandwich is to make the other kids hate me and be jealous of me so that he'd be my only source of affection, and also so that they'd be really cruel to me and mean to me and gang up on me and stuff like that, which helped activate my abilities because I needed to protect myself. And as I said before, your abilities only come out when they need to, and they put you in an environment where you need your abilities, so they're going to come out. So yeah, so this is what it looked like. There's the prison. There's some name for it. The room in the middle, where they can see everything, and there's the prison cells, which had like clear glass windows, and I think a lot of them had bunk beds in them, and they keep you in there with your trauma twins, and I think there'd usually be at least 2 in there, 2 to 4. Yeah, you were kept in these little cells together, and of course they could see you from here. And I think there was an entrance over here. There's an entrance. I mean, it might have been on both sides, but I clearly remember that the training area was like, here's the thing, the office, which was enclosed, and here's a training area, and it had all sorts of equipment and things to train with and stuff like that. And then there was the prison cell. So, and I was like, you know, that was our lives for a very long time, was being kept in these rooms and being broken down until we did what they told us to, until we had the abilities they needed us to have, etc. So that's what it was like. And when I got these memories back of being favored by Preston, I knew some of these other Montauk survivors were probably not going to remember like what they remembered about me. I remembered, and this did happen. Because here I'm having these positive memories of Preston, which it's Stockholm Syndrome. He was, you know, I'm not saying he was a good person. Don't get me confused at all. Quite the opposite. But I had the Stockholm Syndrome, and he was the only thing he was like the closest thing I had to a father. And having these positive memories of being close to him, I knew that there were going to be other Montauk people who didn't like me, who had very not fond memories of me. And it ended up being true. And I ended up having a rift form between me and a lot of these other Montauk people until I went on Penny's show and came clean about how I was messed up, how I was close to Preston, how I did make mistakes. But the thing is we were all forced into that, and eventually I did sort of have a redemption arc due to falling in love with not my trauma twin, but somebody else. Love is a powerful thing. It can save your immortal soul. And it did that for me. And it's taught me so much. And that's, you know, not to be cheesy or stereotypical or whatever, but love is really important in this equation. Because love is a powerful source of energy that's renewable, and hatred is not. And it needs to eat things. Hatred needs to eat things. Love doesn't. It's very powerful. And when you go down the path of darkness, once you get to that place of loneliness where you have bad karma and where you've done so much, it is very nearly impossible to get out of it, if not impossible. So that's why I think the light is so important, and that's why I think it's weaker, the darkness is weaker, and the darkness isn't going to prevail because it's just weaker than light by law. That's just a universal law, in my opinion. It's the yin and yang, and there needs to be balance. One can't exist without the other. But yeah, the light is more powerful, in my opinion. Or maybe they're equally powerful in different ways. All I know is the light is not to be, forgive me for my language, but the light is not to be fucked with. We take care of each other because we have honor, and it comes from a place of integrity, and people are naturally appalled by hatred, by torturing people, by all these disgusting things, and they're not appalled by love and protection and fighting for what's right. Everybody knows that that's the way inside their hearts. And that's what we need to rely on as the thing that's going to save us all. And the thing that's going to make us win this thing. That is a pretty universal truth. So yeah, I've got all sorts of other memories of, that's sort of my timeline. I know I kind of went back and forth, but with the time travel and how I got the memories back, I hope you understand it is confusing, but that's kind of how I remembered it. I do remember being used as like a psychic on the moon, sort of in the same way that I think they do this with children. I think it's a common thing. Tony talked about how he was used like as psychic insurance for drug runners. Well, I think it was kind of the same thing when I was on this table on the moon, being used for the military as like an orb, an all-seeing eye, to communicate with entities, to see other timelines, to see the possible futures of this timeline, to see things in the past, whatever. They used me to do things that they like that, and I was like on drugs, and it was a long time of me just lying on a table. And also there's Mars, which I got transferred there, of course. Centurion. I could do a whole show on Centurion Epsilon or Centurion 5. It's a lot. So I'm not going to go too into it, but I just thought it'd be good to go into my timeline and just kind of, I feel like I snuck some points in there, snuck a few points they just want to make to the community in there, like, you know, especially with the firewall thing. Some people aren't going to get to our level right away. Give them time. Because after you experience enough and see enough, and a lot of these people who are interested and attracted to the subject in the first place, it's because they do have experiences like this and they're just not accepting it yet. So I just think that we should have more hope for the nuts and bolts people that aren't getting all the way on board with us. But also, and in the same breath, we should respect some of the people that are doing the more empirical research, and even the normies can't argue with it because it's completely based in stuff that you can verify. That is hugely important work. I just don't like it when those people talk down on people like me. But I also can understand why they do, and really, there's nothing I can do about it. Other than try to provide as much proof as I can that substantiates my testimony. So, with that being said, I hope I covered a lot. Those aren't all my memories, but that's the bulk of a lot of them, and it's kind of the timeline of how I remember things. Oh yeah, and of course, I should bring up too, I had a falling out, like I said, with the Montauk people. Some of them. We weren't talking for a while. But eventually I went on Penny's show. I came clean. Did I already say this? I hope I'm not repeating myself. I came clean and became friends with I'm pretty much friends with most of the Montauk people again. So it's all about being honest, and yeah, like love saved me. I think I already said that. I just wanted to make sure I didn't forget to put that in there. But yeah, that's me wrapping it up. I hope everybody's doing good out there. We are the Disclosure, and Disclosure is happening now because we say it is.